Summer is in full swing and it is time to grow a truly epic salsa garden. Kevin Spritzer here from Epic Gardening, where it's my goal to help you grow a greener thumb. This is a really cool looking salsa garden, I do have to say. Pat myself on the back right there. It's looking good. So I'm gonna show you in today's video exactly how to plan, prepare, and grow most or all of the plants in this bed here. So cultivate that like button. I will personally bless you with either super sweet or super spicy salsa, whichever you prefer, and let's get into the video. The first thing to talk about with a salsa garden is what size garden you actually need to build. There are quite a few plants that can go into a salsa bed. So what I have here is, it's about 4 foot in depth, and it's about 6.5 long. So this is the Birdie's Tall 8-in-1 bed, which is for sale on the store, link in description. But it's about 24 square foot of growing space, which is more than enough. Actually, it might even be a little bit cramped, but I've crammed a lot of plants in here. I would roughly give yourself 16 to 20 square foot worth of growing space for a salsa garden. So now let's talk about the plants that are actually in the bed. As far as what I've planted in this salsa garden bed, it's quite a bit. This thing is pretty full. Let's start off with some of the larger items here. So we've got tomatillos. So tomatillos making up right here and right here. This is a purple one over here. We have a green one over here. The thing about growing tomatillos is you can't self-pollinate them. One plant cannot pollinate itself, so you need two. That's why I've got two. I chose different ones just for variety, green and purple, but you could just choose the actual exact same one. They just need to have 2 plants. Just a sort of a funky little quirk of growing tomatillos. So that's quite large in the bed. It's taking up, I would say, about 30% of the bed. Of course, I could have staked them up a little bit better. Now we'll go across the back first, then we'll flip around and do the front. Over here we have cilantro, which is ready to harvest. This is nice and green. Notice it's in the back of the bed, so I don't have to deal with too much heat causing it to bolt like we talked about in my cilantro video. Over here, this is cilantro that has bolted and gone to seed. So this is coriander at this point in time, and it's absolutely delicious. You can just eat the seed heads, maybe give it a little pop in your salsa, maybe not. Just something that's been left over in the bed. Now, if you can't grow cilantro in your bed, it's too hot, your climate just can't support it, then I would recommend trying out either this one over here. This is Popolo. So give that a shot. That's a lot more heat tolerant. Or you can go with culantro over here, C-U-L-A-N-T-R-O. Interesting decision on the naming choice right there. Way spikier, kind of almost looks like a weed, but will do better in the heat and a great substitute for cilantro. Now, I do have some random things in here, like the rosemary in the corner and the lemongrass in the corner. That's just a holdover from a different setup that this bed used to have. I'm not saying you couldn't put them in salsa, it is just a little bit random, but feel free to pepper in some herbs if you choose. The only other thing you'll notice in the back is I have a leek that I'm using as just for the leaves. I'm not gonna grow it for that thick white base and maybe put it into a soup or something. So this is a broad-leaved Nira leek. It's a Japanese variety. Not necessarily a classic salsa vegetable, but effectively it's an allium. Just treat it like a green onion and add it into your salsa. So now let's flip around to the front where there's a little bit more interesting stuff going on. So here in the front is where we have our more classically thought of salsa ingredients. So I've got some peppers and tomatoes. We'll kick it off with the tomatoes here. I've got Tasmanian chocolate, which is this one right here, and then I also have Lava Flow, which is this one right here. With a tomato for salsa, everyone's got their own opinion on what's gonna make the best salsa. I'm not gonna claim I'm some salsa expert, but I'm okay at gardening. So I think what you wanna do when you're choosing a tomato for your salsa, you don't necessarily want like a huge brandy wine sandwich slicing style tomato, because there's just a better use case for that tomato. Oftentimes they're quite juicy, and you don't want one that's super, super juicy and full of water. But you also probably don't want like a tiny little cherry or even like a currant style tomato that's really, really small and hard to cut up and dice, just unwieldy and annoying, right? You want that middle ground, a decent firm fleshed tomato. And also you probably don't want to grow something that's super indeterminate. That's kind of up to you. You've got your determinate tomatoes that will cap off at maybe 4 or 5 feet. And you also have got your indeterminates, which go crazy. A lot of you have probably seen the tomatoes in my backyard. I chose to put determinates in this garden because I don't want to trellis them up to 6 feet tall. I'm gonna get enough tomatoes off of these determinate bushes to get the salsa that I want. And so just from a management perspective, I feel like it would look kind of weird to have 6 foot trellises going up for tomatoes and then everything else is living at this level. So just make your life a little bit easier on those tomatoes. We'll talk now about the peppers. So I had to put in a classic salsa pepper. So this is just a standard jalapeno. Honestly, this bush is thriving. There's so many young fruits on this. You can harvest jalapenos at any stage you want. You can harvest them young like this, these baby sort of green levels. You can harvest them, actually let them go red. They'll sweeten up. The flavor kind of goes a little more complex, but the heat drops down a bit. So that is a decision that's up to you. You don't have to harvest a jalapeno at the green stage. You can let it crack a little bit, go a little bit red. Actually, a lot of people prefer it that way. So that's just a fun little tip on the jalapenos, but we've got jalapeno right here. Then we move down here, we've got a tequila sunrise pepper. I'll put an image up of what that final pepper will look like. Then down here, I have a really interesting one, a striped bell pepper. This is a variegated bell pepper, just an experimental one that I'm trying. I'm not saying it's mandatory for a salsa garden, but certainly is a fun one to grow. And then in the way back over here, I have Mad Hatter peppers, which look really weird. They've been one of my more productive peppers that I've ever grown, and I think they taste pretty dang good. So peppers and tomatoes, and then let's talk a little bit about some of the stuff that you do to kind of space and line out what's going in the bed and how to position it. So if you're a space-constrained gardener and maybe the salsa bed is the only bed you have this year, you really have to think about how to get as much out of it as you can. So I'll show you a couple things that we have done here that might help you out. What we did is I put a row of carrots just straight down here, just a furrow. So what you do is you'll make a little furrow, put the carrots in, and then you'll thin them out after they start to germinate. Carrots are notoriously a little bit difficult to germinate. You want to sometimes cover them up with some burlap. We had some germination problems here, just a couple hot days, killed off some of the seedlings. So what I decided to do is just say, you know what, I don't need that many carrots. I'll have one here, one here, one here, one here, every foot or so. And then in between that, I'll put some basil in or even some green onions. So we've got some green onions just littered around, almost sprinkled down in rows underneath the under canopies of these larger plants. So that not only maximizes your space, but also keeps the soil planted, keeps things in the soil, and keeps this whole thing cycling much more. It's crazy how much you can actually get out of a bed like this. So like I said, carrots, basil, and green onions are kind of littered throughout this whole thing. But now let's talk about the overall spacing of the salsa garden. So for spacing, you have to think about what every plant needs and how each plant would affect every other plant. Sounds complicated, it really isn't. So this is roughly west. That would make this south, that would make this north. So south is gonna be your best direction in the northern hemisphere. So for most of the day, this gets full sun, which means that I can put all my major sun-loving plants right up front and center, and they're gonna do perfectly fine. Spacing-wise, I think it's a good idea if you're gonna do tomatillos to put them somewhat closer towards the edge of the bed because you can let them fall off like you're seeing this one do right here. This one's a little bit smaller. If it's in the middle, maybe trellis it upwards. They're just notoriously kind of hard to contain. They spread out a lot more than they would if you were growing, let's say, a tomato. Speaking of the tomatoes, like I said, determinates over indeterminates. In my opinion, you can do whatever you want though, it just works well for me. You're still gonna wanna support them with something. So we've got some bamboo stakes we clipped to the tomatoes too, and then also this Vertex trellis from Gardener Supply Company. You don't necessarily have to close the trellis. You can just put it in here almost like a little cage and it'll hold these all in place. In the back is where I put all of the herbs that might not love full sun, like the cilantro, this popolo, this culantro, some of these random onions and stuff back here. They'll do perfectly fine. And that shade from these plants, once they're grown in, helps out quite a bit. Peppers probably want the most sun. When you're talking about the solanaceous crops like your tomatoes, your peppers, and your eggplants, it roughly goes in that order. Tomatoes, then peppers, then eggplants, as far as how much light and heat they actually want. So I'm gonna put these front and center, all these different peppers, and let them absolutely soak up the heat. There's a lot of different ways you can think about spacing in a raised bed, no matter what you're growing. Most of it just comes down to how much can you fit in without impeding on the growth of everything else that's going on. And in this bed, I think we've done a pretty good job. You're probably wondering, how do I actually take care of all these different plants that want different things in the exact same bed, like watering or pests or diseases or fertilizer? So I'll talk about that just for a second here, but I wouldn't stress too much because all these plants generally will do okay. So peppers are gonna want probably the least water out of everything. So it's nice to have them in one area that you can underwater compared to the rest if you really wanted to treat it that way. I don't do that. I just water the whole thing equally and everything seems to be fine. But just strictly, they would generally want to be watered a little bit less. Your tomatoes and your tomatillos, you can roughly treat them the same as in terms of their care. The only thing you have to keep in mind is that the tomatillos aren't self-fertile. They won't pollinate themselves, so you do need 2 of them, like I said earlier. So if you don't do that, you'll have a really hard time growing tomatoes, in the sense of you won't be growing them. You won't have any at all. Now, with the herbs, most of these herbs actually aren't Mediterranean herbs, so they will require slightly different conditions than that classic dry, hot, not a lot of nutrients in the soil. So a standard vegetable mix is probably going to be just fine for them. You'll do really well with that. Honestly, besides that, guys, it's not that hard to grow a salsa garden. It's mostly in the design of it and the specific crops that you really want. Exactly what tomato do you want to be growing? Do you like, I don't know, shishito peppers? Put that in your salsa. I have no clue. If you want to grow a hotter salsa, maybe go from the jalapenos to the habaneros. If you want a super hot, go with a ghost pepper or a bucholaquia style pepper or a cobra pepper. You can mix that up. You can even go with different colored tomatoes if you want to do something a little more colorful. And honestly, besides that, enjoy your salsa garden. There's not much else to it. If you do have any questions, leave them down in the comments. And until next time, good luck in the garden, keep growing, and I'll see you on the next video.